going to start today with a story, and I will end with a call for action. In 2006, I was a young doctoral student just starting the research phase of my dissertation. I was investigating how incarcerated people feel about the mandatory classes they're required to take in prison. I'd never been to a prison before, and so I was really trying to prepare myself to look as invisible as a young woman in a men's medium security prison could look like. So I wore my hair in a bun because the prison had told me not to wear it in a ponytail. I wore the ugliest shoes I could find because the prison told me to wear shoes I could easily run in. I wore no makeup, no jewelry, and I wore a sweater in the Midwest in July. 16 years ago, yeah, laugh at that, she thought she had it all together, ready to go. As I walked in the gate that first day, I was met by a corrections officer who said he would walk me from the gate to the place where I would do my interviews each day. He was a really tall guy, and he had like a white mustache and one of those like Canadian Mountie looking hats and a gun, and so I felt pretty good. I was like, okay, I'll be fine. He started to walk me that very first day across the prison yard, and I realized that we were approaching a basketball game with a couple of inmates in orange playing, and about 4 or 5 corrections officers sitting up along a back retaining wall. The closer we got, the more I realized that he wasn't actually going to walk me around the basketball court, but he was instead parading me straight through it. Of course, the game had to stop. The inmates parted, and that's pretty much when my worst fears were realized. Of course, it was catcalls, but it was also lewd gestures and motions and remarks about what they'd like to do to me if they ever got a hold of me. And that's how it went. Almost every day that I was there, 3 days a week, for 3 months, I would be paraded through that basketball game and dealt with that harassment. But not once, in all the times that I went to that prison, in all the times that I walked through that game, did any of the catcalls or lewd gestures or remarks ever come from a prison inmate. Surprised? I sure was. I was not prepared for that. I was surprised that the people who were there to protect me didn't, and I was surprised that the people who were incarcerated for being convicted of crimes weren't the ones harassing me. What the corrections officers did was never about me. It was about the fact that they are entrenched with the incarcerated people in a system that is designed solely to punish. And it is because they are entrenched in a system where power is currency. They've been trained to use power as currency in order to survive along with the inmates for their survival as well. So for the last 16 years, I've been thinking about this experience, and I started to ask myself a couple of questions. What would happen if the corrections officers and incarcerated people met under different conditions? What would happen if we removed the prison and replaced it with a classroom? This idea is not at all unique to me. Prison education programs have been going on at different universities across the world for decades. And it's a good thing too, because we know that 62% of people who are released from prison will be rearrested within the first 3 years. And we also know that 71% of people who are released from prison will be rearrested within the first 5 years. But we know too that people who participate in prison education programs are 30% less likely to recidivate by year 3. Today I'm a professor of sociology and criminology at Coastal Carolina University, and I teach a class called the Jail Experience. It's part of a larger program I'm building on our campus called the Incarcerated Voice Initiative, Visualizing Opportunities in Correctional Education. Half of my class is incarcerated students, and half of my class are campus-based students. During non-COVID times, we travel to the jail where my students sit together in a classroom as one and learn from each other. During COVID times, we've had to Zoom. My incarcerated students are part of a 1-year intensive jail diversion program where they spend a year behind bars working on cognitive behavioral classes, group therapy, and understanding their recovery. Most of them are incarcerated for drug felony convictions, and most suffer from substance use disorder. My campus-based students, on the other hand, are sociology, psychology, intelligence and national security majors, and criminal justice majors. They have aspirations to go on to become social workers, counselors, lawyers, and of course, corrections officers. In class, they learn together from my lectures for about the first half of class, and then in the second half, they get together, get to know each other, work together toward a final class project by engaging those principles of compassion, empathy, and service toward each other. Throughout the course of creating this class and the larger program on my campus, I've learned a couple of big lessons. Number one, participation in prison education classes should always be voluntary. If an incarcerated student is not in this class voluntarily, or if it's a condition of their release, they won't get the most out of it, and they should always have the choice about if they want to participate. Similarly, campus-based students shouldn't take a class like this as a requirement of their graduation. It should be a choice, and it should be an elective for everyone involved. Number two, your pedagogy has to be flexible, and it should also be informed by incarcerated people. So what I mean by this is that their needs, your campus-based and your incarcerated students' needs, will change constantly over the course of the semester. You have to be willing to adapt to those changes and listen to your students' needs. It's not enough just to read the literature on best practices or understand what inclusive pedagogy is. You have to make those efforts as an instructor to really be flexible and help them when they need help. You should fight for college credit. The incarcerated students are taking this class just like the other students, and they deserve to receive college credit. There are significant barriers for incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people to get into our educational institutions, but if you're an instructor or if you're someone at a university, this is a fight worth having for them. And finally, we should avoid gatekeeping and proprietary programs. What I mean by that is you shouldn't just hand select your best campus-based students or your highest performing students academically, and you shouldn't just select your least risky incarcerated students. In fact, many times, the students who don't perform best academically or the incarcerated students who are more likely perhaps to recidivate are the ones who need this class the most. So you should be inclusive in your choices of who gets to take your class. I've also learned a couple of little lessons. Zoom sucks in a cinder block room. That was a bit of a problem that we had. So there were quite a few audio issues that we had to work out, but again, with a flexible pedagogy and understanding that you've got to change and adapt as the circumstances change really helped me get through this. Language matters. Using terms like incarcerated student versus inmate, convict, or prisoner, or criminal is really important to creating as much of a sense of equity as you can from the beginning of your class. Reading and comprehension levels will vary significantly. Many of my incarcerated students don't have a GED or a high school diploma and have encountered the criminal justice system many times throughout their lives. Whereas my campus-based students are typically seniors about to graduate taking a 400 level college elective. And so again, you have to be flexible. You have to be willing to understand where your students are and meet them in that moment where they need to be. And finally, allow yourself to be surprised. I was extremely surprised when my university was as supportive as it was. In fact, they lent 20 brand new iPads to a bunch of inmates at our local jail, and it worked out perfectly. The jail, the detention center itself, spent a couple $1,000s upgrading their Wi-Fi just so those incarcerated people could take this class. So allow yourself to be surprised. Here's that concrete room. These are my students from last semester trying to Zoom. We worked it out eventually, but it took a minute. It may also be surprising to you that you can also advocate for educational justice for incarcerated people. Here's how. Are you a student? Ask your college professors if you could take a class like this or if they would be interested in offering it or getting training on how to do it. Are you a university professor or an educator? Seek that training out. Apply for external grants and ask your dean, repeatedly if necessary. Are you a college dean or administrator? Be like mine and say yes. Are you an employer? Seek out expert counsel on how to create hiring practices for formerly incarcerated people. And also know that providing on-the-job training is an educational experience. Are you someone who works in law enforcement? See if there are any classes like this that are offered between your local community college or university and your institution where you work. If not, know that you can be the conduit to create that educational opportunity for the people incarcerated in your jail or prison. Are you a formerly incarcerated person? Getting access to education after you've been convicted of a felony or after you've been incarcerated is difficult. It is more difficult than it should be. There are ways to work around these issues, but you have to know who to talk to and you have to know the right questions to ask. Reach out to me, and if I can't help you, I will work to find someone who can. Are you a wealthy benefactor looking to spend millions of dollars on a good cause? Just call me. We can talk. Finally, are you just someone who's interested in helping others? Look for local nonprofits in your area that work with incarcerated people. Educate yourself more about educational justice, and vote for candidates who emphasize inclusivity, not incarceration. I have a couple quotes from some of my students from this past semester that I want to read to you now, and then I'll end with the call to action. This is Bradley from my fall semester class last year. He said, I took the CCU jail experience class to see what college was like and learned that I can really go back to school because I feel like I can do it now. My passion is to help troubled youth and keep them from going down the path I went down in life. Kelsey says, I took this class because there's no other class offered to us like this, and to learn about similarities between people that otherwise would have never met. From the amazing lectures to the one-on-one meetings, I think this class taught me everything I expected and more. If you're someone who's thinking about participating in this class, I highly recommend. It opens your eyes to things you never would have thought about previously. Two more. This is Jameson. I've enjoyed this class throughout the whole semester, and it's probably one of the best classes I've had at CCU. Just getting the chance to hear the experiences and share a classroom with people who are incarcerated really opened up my eyes. It provided me with an experience that I will never forget, and it made me feel as though I made some true connections. And finally, not that you're supposed to have favorites, but from Luis, I took the CCU jail experience class. I wanted to be a part of something positive for once. Usually that's not an option in a jail setting. Plus, we are one of the first classes of our kind, and that makes me excited. I'm grateful for this class, and I hope it continues throughout the years to come to help more inmates feel like normal people once again. This is us on Zoom, my last fall class. So my call to you is this. While you may not think that you have the resources, ability, clout to advocate for educational justice for incarcerated people, you do have a voice. And I promise that there are more people willing to listen to that voice than you may realize. If we work together to do the hard and messy work of creating systemic changes in our educational institutions, I think we'll find that we could have long-term, sustainable, and even surprising changes. Thanks.